Before we start, kindly subscribe to my channel and tell me, where in the universe are you watching from? Captain Celine Ryder stood at the edge of the dark corridor, her boots silent on the cold metal floor. The air inside the alien station was thick with tension, as if even the walls were waiting for something to happen. Her breath, steady but heavy, came out in small clouds as she adjusted the blaster strapped to her thigh. Her team was close behind, alert and ready for anything. "Stay sharp," Celine commanded in a low voice, her icy blue eyes scanning the surroundings. Her platinum blonde hair, tied tightly into a ponytail, barely moved in the still air. She had led her team through countless battles, but today felt different. Today, the fate of Earth rested on the information they might find within this alien fortress. Her second in command, Lieutenant Darius Vale, stepped forward, his dark hair tousled from the wind outside the station. Tall and muscular, Darius was the kind of man who looked calm on the outside, but Celine knew how fiercely he protected his squad. He met her eyes and gave a subtle nod, his sharp green eyes reflecting the same unease she felt. Sergeant Alex Wynne, the team's technician, walked a few paces behind them, her red hair bright against the darkness of the corridor. Alex was quick-witted and full of energy, never one to back down from a challenge. Her quick fingers were always ready to hack into any system they needed, but her impulsive nature sometimes made Celine worry. Still, she trusted her with her life. "Found it." Alex's voice broke the silence, and everyone turned toward her. She was crouched near a reinforced door, typing rapidly on a small device. The door slid open with a hiss. Inside, the room was colder than the rest of the station, and an eerie glow bathed the surroundings. In the center of the chamber was a figure, tall, with silver skin that seemed to shimmer even in the dim light. The being sat perfectly still, chained to the floor, but its eyes glowed faintly amber, staring directly at Celine. A shiver ran down Celine's spine, but she forced herself to stay focused. The reports they had gathered suggested this being was crucial to the Tyrex Dominion's plans, and now it was finally within their reach. "Is it alive?" Darius asked, his voice low and cautious. Alex leaned in closer, her fingers working at her device again. "Yeah, but it doesn't seem normal. I think it's some kind of telepathic energy field. No signs of immediate threat, though." Celine stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. "Let's find out what it's hiding." She approached the figure cautiously, keeping her blaster ready. It didn't move at first, but then the being's amber eyes locked onto hers. There was an odd sensation, like an electric pulse running through the air between them. Celine froze. "You?" The being's voice was like a whisper, though its lips didn't move. It was as if the words were inside her mind. "You have come to release me, human." Celine swallowed hard, but held her ground. "Who are you?" "I am Verex," the being answered. "Once a guardian of the Aetherians, now a prisoner of your enemies." The voice echoed in her thoughts, and she could feel its power. "If you touch me, human, you will unlock a power beyond your understanding. But beware, it comes with a price." Celine narrowed her eyes. "What kind of power?" "Power to change the course of the war," Verex replied, his voice growing stronger. "But also a force that can destroy you if you are not strong enough." Her mind raced. This was what they had been searching for, a way to defeat the Tyrex. But could she trust him? Could they afford to ignore such an offer? Before she could say anything, Darius stepped closer, his voice tense. "Celine, we don't know what this is. It could be a trap." "I don't think it is," she replied quietly. There was something in Verex's presence, something she couldn't explain. Despite his warnings, she felt drawn to him. "You must touch me," Verex said again, the urgency in his voice now unmistakable. Celine hesitated for only a moment. Then, with a deep breath, she stepped forward and laid her hand on Verex's chest. The moment her fingers made contact, a surge of energy shot through her. She gasped, feeling a rush of power unlike anything she had ever experienced before. Her body tingled, her senses heightened, and for the briefest moment, she felt like she could do anything. Then, just as suddenly, the energy faded, leaving her breathless. "What did you do to me?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Verex's eyes gleamed. "You have unlocked a power you cannot yet control, human. The question is, will you learn to master it before it consumes you?" Celine stepped back, her mind reeling from the overwhelming sensation. As her team watched, she felt different, stronger, but also uncertain. What had she just unleashed? Captain Celine Ryder stood on the bridge of her ship, staring out into the cold void of space. Her breath came in shallow, shaky gasps as she tried to regain control of her racing thoughts. The surge of power she had felt when touching Verex still pulsed inside her, electric, raw, and unsettling. "How do you feel?" Lieutenant Darius Vale asked, his voice gentle but laced with concern. He was leaning against the doorframe, watching her closely. His dark hair fell messily around his face, and his green eyes held a flicker of worry. Celine didn't turn to face him. She wasn't sure she could. I don't know," she replied, her voice quiet. "Something's inside me now. I can feel it." She glanced down at her hands, her fingers trembling. The power was still there, buzzing just beneath the surface of her skin, like a hidden storm waiting to break free. Darius took a few steps closer, his presence steadying her. "You need to learn to control it, Celine. We don't know what it could do if you lose control." "I know." She clenched her fists, trying to push the power back down. It had been so easy at first, just the faintest touch of Verex's chest, and then the world exploded in bright, overwhelming energy. She had felt invincible, like nothing could stand in her way. But now, with the power coiling deep inside her, it felt like it was pulling at her from all directions. "We need to figure out what this power is," Darius said, his voice soft but insistent. "And we need to do it fast. That HFY-SCI won't wait for us to figure it out." Celine nodded, forcing herself to focus. "We'll get to work on that. But first, we need to be sure of what we're dealing with." She turned toward Alex, who was sitting at a console nearby, her red hair glowing under the ship's lights. Alex had been silent ever since they left the alien station, her fingers flying over her keyboard as she worked in the background. Despite the tension in the air, Alex always had a knack for finding solutions to difficult problems. "Anything?" Celine asked, her voice sharp. Alex looked up, her face filled with determination. "I've been scanning everything I can about Verex and the Aetherians. There's a lot of information buried in their technology. It's old, but I think I've found something." She turned the screen towards Celine, showing a holographic image of what looked like an ancient Aetherian artifact. "It's called the Aetherian Core. It's said to be a source of unimaginable energy, capable of enhancing abilities like what you just experienced." Celine frowned. "And what does that mean for me?" "It means you're linked to it now," Alex said, her voice tinged with awe. "That power inside you, it's connected to the core, just like Verex is, but I'm still not sure what it does to the human body. We don't know if you can handle it long term." Celine didn't want to hear that. She had always prided herself on being strong, on being the one who could keep her team safe. But now she was the one who needed saving. "Is there any way to remove it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alex paused. "I don't know, but I can help you learn to control it. If we can figure out the energy signatures, maybe we can stabilize it." Before Celine could respond, Darius stepped forward again. His eyes were full of concern, but also something else, something warmer, softer. He had always been there for her, through every mission, every battle. She couldn't help but notice how close he was, his presence comforting yet overwhelming. "Celine," Darius said softly, his hand brushing against hers. "You're not alone in this. We'll figure this out together." Celine looked up at him, meeting his gaze. His hand lingered for a moment before he pulled back, but the warmth of his touch stayed with her, lingering in her chest. She hadn't realized how much she needed his support. his quiet strength. There was a tenderness in his eyes that made her heart beat faster, and for a moment, the weight of the power inside her seemed to lessen. "Thank you," she whispered, unsure if he knew how much his words meant to her. Before he could answer, Alex stood up, pushing her chair back with a squeak. "All right, enough with the sentimental stuff," she said, her usual cheeky grin returning. "We've got a lot of work to do, and I'm not going to let you two sit around moping. Let's figure out how to turn this power into a weapon." Celine gave a small laugh, the tension easing from her shoulders. "You're right, Alex. Let's get to work." As the team moved into action, Celine felt a sense of calm wash over her. With Darius and Alex by her side, she knew she could face whatever came next, even if it meant mastering a power she still didn't fully understand. Together, they would fight for Earth. Together, they would find a way to control the forces that had been unleashed. And maybe, just maybe, they would survive. Captain Celine Ryder sat at the table, her fingers lightly tapping the surface as her mind raced. She could still feel the power pulsing inside her, a constant hum beneath her skin. It was as if her body wasn't her own anymore. The touch of Verex had unlocked something deep within her, something ancient and powerful. She had never felt so alive, and so terrified. "Anything new?" she asked, her voice calm, but her eyes betraying the anxiety she felt. She glanced over at Alex Wynne, who was hunched over a terminal, her fingers flying across the keyboard with practiced speed. Alex didn't look up, but her voice was laced with excitement. "Actually, yes. I've been digging through the Aetherian data. This stuff is old, but it's fascinating. You're not just connected to the Aetherian core, Celine. You're linked to their legacy. The core isn't just power, it's knowledge. Knowledge that's been hidden for centuries." Celine leaned in closer, her curiosity piqued. "What kind of knowledge?" Alex finally turned the screen toward her, revealing a holographic map of the galaxy, with distant stars and ancient symbols glowing faintly across the map. The Aetherians were not just warriors, Celine. They were keepers of balance. They controlled energy on a scale we can't even imagine. The core, what you touched, is a conduit for all that power. It's what made the Aetherians gods to other species. And now, it's inside you. Celine's heart skipped a beat. The weight of what Alex was saying sank in. She wasn't just dealing with new abilities. She was holding a piece of something much larger, a piece that could reshape the galaxy itself. Darius Vale, who had been standing silently by the door, finally stepped forward, his green eyes focused and serious. "What does that mean for us? Can we use this power against the Kyrex?" Alex's fingers paused over the console as she looked up at Darius. "The Kyrex are just the beginning. If Celine truly taps into the core's full potential, she could do more than just defeat the Kyrex. She could change the entire balance of power in the galaxy." Celine's stomach churned. It wasn't just about saving Earth anymore. If she allowed herself to be consumed by the power of the Aetherians, who knew what would happen, what kind of person would she become? "I don't want to be a god, Alex," she said softly, her voice tinged with fear. "I just want to save my people." Darius stepped up behind her, his hand brushing her shoulder in a gesture of support. "You won't do it alone, Celine. We're with you. We'll help you control it, together." Celine turned to look at him, her heart thudding in her chest. There was something in his eyes, something more than friendship. His presence was like a steady anchor in the storm of emotions she was experiencing. She felt a pull toward him, a connection deeper than just comrades in arms. She had known him for years, fought by his side in countless battles. But this was different. "Thank you, Darius," she whispered, her voice soft. She could feel the heat rising in her cheeks. For a moment, their gazes held, and she saw the same unspoken thoughts reflected in his eyes. The bond between them was stronger than ever, even without words. Alex cleared her throat, breaking the moment. "Not to interrupt your little love scene, but we have bigger things to worry about." Celine couldn't help but smile at Alex's teasing, though it didn't erase the heaviness in her chest. What do you mean, bigger things? That T-Rex are planning something. I've intercepted communications, and they're aware of you, Celine. They know what you're capable of. If we don't act fast, they'll come for us. Darius's jaw tightened. We'll be ready. Celine nodded, feeling the weight of her team's trust. They were right. She couldn't let fear control her. They had been through so much together, and now, more than ever, she needed to be strong. For them, and for Earth. I'll master this power, she said, her voice steady. I won't let it control me. I won't let it change who I am. Alex raised an eyebrow. Good, because I'd rather have you as a badass captain than some glowing alien overlord any day. Celine chuckled, the tension in the room lifting slightly. But inside, the storm was far from over. The power inside her was growing stronger, and with it came the weight of impossible choices. But one thing was clear, she wouldn't face this alone. As Darius gave her a reassuring smile, Celine knew that no matter how much the power inside her grew, the strength of her team, and the love she was starting to recognize in her heart, would always be her guiding force. The tension in the ship's command center was thick, like the calm before a storm. Captain Celine Ryder stood before the holographic map of the galaxy, her eyes tracing the coordinates that Alex had uncovered earlier. The HFY-SCI were making their move. They were heading straight for Earth, and it was only a matter of time before they arrived. Everything's ready, Captain, Alex said, her voice focused as she sat at the controls. Her fingers danced over the console, and the glowing lights of the screen reflected off her face. We've got the weapons primed, the shields reinforced, and I've set up a few surprises for the T-Rex if they try anything funny. Darius Vale stood beside her, his arms crossed and his green eyes narrowed. The silence between him and Celine was comfortable, but it also carried an unspoken weight. Both of them knew that the battle they were about to face would be unlike anything they had ever fought before. We still don't know how to control this power, Celine said, her voice low. She turned to look at him, her heart still racing from the strange surge of energy she had felt when she touched Varex. If I lose control, you won't, Darius interrupted, his voice firm but soft. We'll help you. We're not going to let this consume you. Celine's heart fluttered at his words, but she pushed the feeling aside. Now was not the time for distractions. They had a mission to complete, and her emotions had to be kept in check. The survival of Earth depended on it. She turned back to the map. That T-Rex fleet is moving faster than we expected. We got less than 48 hours before they arrive. Alex, what's the plan? Alex's fingers paused over the console, and she looked up at Celine with a serious expression. We'll have to engage them before they reach Earth's orbit. I've already set up a decoy operation to draw some of their fleet away, but the rest, we'll be facing them head-on. We'll need more firepower, Celine said, her mind racing with strategies. And I don't care how it's done. If this power inside me is the key to winning, I need to know how to control it. We can't afford to fail. Darius stepped forward, his green eyes soft but steady. We'll figure it out. I know you can do this, Celine. You've always been strong. You'll learn to control it. Celine met his gaze, and for a moment, the weight of everything she was carrying seemed to lessen. It wasn't just his support, it was the unspoken trust that had always existed between them. They had been through so much together, and now, more than ever, she needed to believe in herself. All right, she said, her voice resolute. Let's do it. We fight for Earth. We fight for everyone. Alex nodded, her fingers already typing commands into the system. I'm locking in the coordinates for our first strike. We'll hit them hard and fast. But we need to get you prepared, Captain. Celine's mind raced, but she took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. How do we prepare me for this? She asked. Alex turned toward her, her eyes full of understanding. We don't know the full extent of the power yet, but we've been working on a way to tap into it slowly, without overwhelming you. We've got to build up your focus first, and then we'll start channeling the energy into the weapon systems." Darius stepped up beside Celine, his hand briefly resting on her shoulder. The touch was brief, but it was enough to send a wave of warmth through her. She hadn't realized how much she needed him to be close. The connection between them was undeniable, but there was no time to explore it now. "Are you ready?" Darius asked, his voice full of quiet strength. Celine nodded, swallowing hard. "Let's do this." The team worked in tandem, their efforts seamless as they prepared for the battle ahead. Alex coordinated the ship's systems, adjusting the weapons and shields to their full potential, while Darius kept an eye on the incoming Kyrex fleet, ensuring that everything was in place. Celine focused on the power inside her, trying to tap into it without allowing it to take control. But as the minutes ticked by, the energy inside her began to grow. She could feel it, thrumming beneath her skin. It was seductive, pulling at her, promising power beyond measure. She had to stay focused. She had to stay in control. "Captain, we're ready," Alex said, her voice tense. "The decoy is set, and the fleet is in position. It's time." Celine stood tall, her hands steady despite the storm raging inside her. She knew the battle wouldn't be easy, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could keep the power in check. But with Darius by her side and her team behind her, she was ready to face whatever came next. "Let's go," she said, her voice unwavering. The time had come. The Cyrex were almost here. The hum of the ship's engines filled the command center, a steady reminder of the battle that was about to unfold. Captain Celine Ryder stood in front of the control panel, her hands gripping the edge, her knuckles white. Her heart raced, not just from the adrenaline, but because she could feel the power inside her. The power that had been unlocked when she touched Varex. It was there, always pulsing beneath the surface, reminding her that nothing would ever be the same. "Captain, the Kyrex fleet is almost in range," Alex said, her voice tight with urgency. She sat at the main console, her fingers flying over the controls as she monitored the incoming ships. The holographic display above her flickered, showing the dark shapes of the Kyrex fleet approaching. Celine nodded, taking a deep breath. "What's our status?" "We've set up the decoys," Alex replied quickly, "but they're closing in faster than we anticipated. If we're going to take them down, we need to move now." Darius Vale, standing just behind her, spoke up. His voice was calm but filled with a quiet intensity. "We can't let them reach Earth. We're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting for everyone." Celine turned to look at him, her gaze softening for a moment. His words always had a way of grounding her, reminding her why they were here. She met his green eyes, and for a fleeting moment, she felt the weight of everything they were carrying. The team, Earth, the power inside her. "Are you ready?" Darius asked, his voice gentle but full of concern. Celine didn't hesitate. "I'm ready. Let's move out." The ship shook as they entered the battlefield, that Cyrex fleet now in full view. Celine's pulse quickened as she gripped the controls, her fingers trembling slightly. She could feel the power inside her stirring, eager to be used. But she forced herself to focus, remembering what Darius had said. She couldn't let it take control. Not now. Not when so much was at stake. "All systems are online," Alex said, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "Weapons are armed. We're ready to engage." "Nice shot," Darius called out, his voice filled with approval as the ship rocked from the impact of the explosions. He was by her side in an instant, watching the battle unfold with his usual calm demeanor, but his eyes were focused, determined. Celine's grip tightened on the controls as she felt the power surge inside her. It was as if the energy was calling to her, urging her to release it all. She could sense the destruction it could bring, if she allowed it. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, trying to keep herself steady. "Celine," Alex shouted, "we've got incoming." Several HFY-SCI ships have broken through the decoy. We need to deal with them now. Celine opened her eyes, the weight of the responsibility pressing down on her. She couldn't afford to hesitate. Prepare for a direct attack, she ordered. We need to take them out before they can get any closer. The ship shook again, and a burst of energy blasted from the enemy ship. Celine felt the impact in her chest, a sharp, jolting sensation. She gritted her teeth, refusing to let the pain distract her. Get them off us, Darius said, his voice now more urgent. Celine took a deep breath, and with a sudden force, she let the power inside her rise. A surge of energy flooded her body, overwhelming her senses. It was like a rush of fire, dangerous and wild. Her fingers gripped the controls tightly as she focused, trying to channel the power into the ship's weapon systems. In an instant, the ship's cannons fired with a deafening roar, and a massive shockwave of energy ripped through the HFY-SCI fleet. Several ships disintegrated, and others were sent spiraling into space, helpless against the force of Celine's power. She gasped for air, the power inside her retreating for a moment. But it wasn't gone. It was still there, pulsing, stronger than ever. Did you see that? Alex said, her voice full of awe. That was incredible. Darius looked at her, his eyes wide with admiration. You've done it, Celine. You've unlocked it. You're in control. For a moment, Celine allowed herself a breath of relief. But the battle wasn't over. The HFY-SCI were still coming, and she knew they wouldn't back down so easily. Keep firing, Celine said, her voice steady now. We're not done yet. The battle raged on, the hum of weapons fire and explosions filling the air. Celine's heart pounded as she continued to channel the power inside her, using it to protect her team and strike down the HFY fleet. She felt alive, stronger than she had ever felt before. But with every burst of energy, she couldn't help but wonder, how long could she keep this up? With the HFY fleet now in full retreat, Celine knew that the fight wasn't over. But in that moment, she had tasted the power she had been given, and she was ready to face whatever came next. The battle had been won, at least for now. The HFY fleet had retreated, their ships scattering into the void of space after suffering heavy damage. But Celine Ryder couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The power inside her still surged, burning with energy she couldn't fully control. She stood in the ship's command center, her gaze fixed on the vastness of space beyond the windows. The stars were scattered across the black expanse, silent witnesses to the battle they had just survived. The ship's quiet hum was the only sound, but it didn't comfort her. There was something unsettling about how the power inside her had taken over. She had used it to protect her team, but at what cost? Captain, Darius Vale's voice broke through her thoughts. He stood at her side, his presence steady, just like always. But there was an unease in his eyes. You did great out there. The team's already talking about how you turned the tide of the battle. Celine didn't turn to look at him. She knew he was trying to reassure her, but it wasn't enough. But what about me? She whispered, almost to herself. What if I lose control next time? What if this power changes who I am? Darius stepped closer, his voice soft but firm. You've already proven that you're in control, Celine. You're not some weapon you can't handle. You're a leader. You've always been. Celine finally turned to face him. Her heart skipped a beat at the warmth in his gaze. She had always known Darius was her rock, but in that moment, with the weight of the galaxy on her shoulders, she needed him more than ever. I don't feel like a leader right now, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. I feel like something else, something dangerous. Darius reached out, gently taking her hand in his. His touch was comforting, grounding her in a way nothing else could. You're not alone in this. We're all here with you. We'll face whatever comes next together. For a moment, Celine just stood there, holding his hand, feeling the connection between them grow stronger. It was more than just support. It was something deeper, something neither of them had ever fully acknowledged before. Her pulse quickened as she looked into his eyes, and for a moment, the world seemed to fade away. But before she could say anything, Alex's voice interrupted from the doorway. "Sorry to interrupt the moment, Captain, but we've got a situation." Celine reluctantly let go of Darius's hand and turned to face her. Alex was already at her console, her face tense. "What's going on?" Celine asked, her mind shifting back into command mode. "That T-Rex weren't just retreating," Alex said, tapping a few keys. "I've been monitoring their communications, and it looks like they were waiting for something. They've sent a distress signal to the rest of their fleet, and I'm picking up something else, something big, heading this way." Celine's heart sank. "How soon?" "Less than 12 hours, Alex replied, her voice tight with concern. Darius stepped forward, his expression grim. "They're calling for backup. We're not dealing with just a few ships this time, are we?" Alex shook her head. "No, the T-Rex fleet is mobilizing for a full-scale assault, and from the looks of it, they've got something new, something powerful." Celine's stomach twisted. She had barely learned to control the power inside her. How could she hope to face an enemy this powerful? "We need a plan," Darius said, his voice strong and commanding. "We can't let them reach Earth." Celine turned to face the map of the galaxy it was projected before them. The new threat was coming faster than they could react. But there was no choice. They had to stand and fight. "Alex," Celine said, her voice filled with determination, "prepare our defenses. We need to hit them hard and fast. We can't wait for them to get any closer." Alex nodded and started working at her console. "Already on it, Captain." Celine turned to Darius, her gaze unwavering. "We need to be ready for whatever they throw at us. I don't care what it is. We will stop them." Darius's eyes softened. He gave a small smile, but it was clear he was just as concerned as she was. "We'll face this together. You're not in this alone." There was a moment of quiet between them, just long enough for Celine to feel the weight of the decision ahead. This was no longer just about saving Earth. It was about keeping the universe from falling into chaos. And with Darius at her side, and the team behind her, Celine knew she had to be the leader they needed. She had to control the power inside her, no matter the cost. "Let's get to work," she said, her voice steady now. The ship's interior was quiet, a strange silence hanging in the air. The crew had scattered to their stations, but there was no doubt in anyone's mind that the calm they were experiencing now would not last long. Celine Ryder sat at the helm of the command center, her fingers lightly tracing the console in front of her, lost in thought. Darius Vale stood beside her, his presence strong and steady. As always, he had been quiet ever since the news of the incoming T-Rex fleet had reached them. He knew as well as she did that there was no time to waste. The coming battle was going to be unlike anything they had faced before. Yet even now, with the weight of everything pressing down on her, Celine found a strange comfort in his presence. "Do you ever think about what will happen if we lose?" Celine asked softly, not looking up from the console. She wasn't sure why she had asked. It wasn't like her to question her own strength. But something about this fight, about the power inside her, made her wonder if she was truly ready for what was coming. Darius didn't answer right away. He simply stood next to her, his arms crossed, as though he was giving her time to think. Finally, after a long pause, he spoke. "We can't afford to lose," he said quietly. "We fight for Earth. We fight for everyone. And we fight for each other." Celine glanced at him, her heart thudding in her chest. There was something in his words, something in the way he said them, that made her feel like they were fighting for more than just survival. They were fighting for the future. They were fighting for the chance to live without fear, without uncertainty. "I know," Celine whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "But what if I can't control this power? What if I can't?" Darius reached over and gently took her hand, his touch warm and steady. "You don't have to do it alone," he said, his voice full of quiet confidence. "We're all in this together." For a moment, Celine was quiet. His words sank deep into her heart. The power inside her had been overwhelming at times, but Darius was right. She didn't have to face it alone. She had him. She had her team. And that gave her the strength she needed. "Thank you," she said softly, squeezing his hand. She couldn't put into words how much his presence meant to her. It was more than just support. It was the feeling that no matter what, she wasn't alone in this fight. The door to the command center slid open, and Alex walked in, her expression tense. "Captain, we've got new information," she said, quickly moving to the console and pulling up the latest data. Celine and Darius stood up, turning to face her. Alex's face was lit by the glow of the screen as she scanned the details. "That HFY-SCI fleet isn't just bringing reinforcements," Alex said, her voice grim. "They got a new weapon. A super weapon, I think. It's unlike anything we've ever seen." Celine's heart skipped a beat. "What kind of weapon?" Alex hesitated for a moment, then tapped a few keys to bring up a 3D model of the approaching HFY-SCI ship. The design was massive, far larger than anything they had encountered before. "This thing could take out an entire planet if they get close enough," Alex explained. "We don't have much time to figure out how to stop it." "How soon before they reach us?" Darius asked, his voice low but urgent. "At the rate they're coming, they'll be here in less than 6 hours," Alex replied. "We need a plan, and fast." Celine took a deep breath. She could feel the weight of everything pressing down on her. The power, the responsibility, the lives that depended on them. It felt like too much. But there was no going back now. She turned to Darius, her eyes meeting his with determination. "We'll need to strike first," she said. "We can't afford to wait for them to reach Earth." Darius nodded, his jaw set. "We'll hit them before they can use that weapon." Alex was already typing rapidly at the console. "I've got a plan. It's risky, but it might just work. We'll need to hit their ship's weak points, especially the core where the weapon is stored. If we can disable it before it fully activates, we might have a chance." Celine took one last look at the map of the galaxy on the screen, her fingers flexing with the building power inside her. The reality of what was coming felt like a storm that she couldn't stop. But she had no choice but to face it. She had to be ready, not just for herself, but for everyone depending on them. "Let's do it," Celine said, her voice strong now. "We fight now, or we don't fight at all." Darius stepped forward, his eyes locking with hers. "We're with you, Captain, all the way." For the first time in days, Celine felt a surge of confidence. They were ready. Together, they could face whatever the HFY-SCI threw at them. The battle was about to begin, and they weren't going to back down. The countdown echoed in the command center, a constant reminder that time was running out. In just a few hours, that HFY-SCI fleet would reach Earth, bringing with them a terrifying weapon capable of destroying everything in its path. The crew of the Horizon had only one chance to stop them. Celine Ryder stood at the helm, her mind racing. The power that flowed through her was still there, simmering beneath the surface, waiting to be unleashed. It was a constant presence, a force that made her feel both invincible and vulnerable. She couldn't afford to lose control now, not with so much at stake. "Captain, we're ready," Alex said, her voice steady as she stood beside the console, fingers poised over the controls. "All systems are primed. The team is in position." Celine nodded, her jaw set in determination. "Thank you, Alex. Let's make this count." Darius Vale stood just behind her, his presence a comforting reminder that she wasn't facing this alone. He'd been by her side through everything, and now, as the enemy approached, his support was more crucial than ever. "You ready?" he asked softly, his voice filled with quiet confidence. Celine turned to him, meeting his gaze. "I have no choice but to be ready." The ship rumbled as it powered up for the final assault. The engines hummed, vibrating beneath her feet. In the distance, the shadow of the HFY-SCI superweapon loomed closer, a monstrous shape that threatened to wipe out everything in its path. Alex's voice broke through the tension. They're within range. We can't wait any longer. Then let's do this, Celine said, her voice firm. The Horizon surged forward, its weapons charging. Celine could feel the power inside her responding, pulsing through her veins like fire. The alien energy that had once been a source of fear now felt like a weapon, a tool that would help her protect everything she loved. Target the superweapon's core, Celine ordered, her fingers gripping the control panel. Aim for the weak points. We don't have the luxury of a second chance. The ship's cannons fired with precision, blasting through the dark expanse of space toward the HFY-SCI fleet. Explosions lit up the void as several ships were struck, their energy shields flickering and collapsing. The battle had begun. We're making progress, Alex called out, her voice filled with excitement. The HFY-SCI are retreating, but they're not done yet. Celine's heart raced as she watched the incoming fire from the enemy fleet. It was overwhelming, but she refused to back down. She could feel the power inside her growing stronger, feeding off her determination. She wasn't just a soldier anymore. She was the key to their victory. Braced for impact, Darius shouted as the ship rocked under the enemy's fire. The Horizon trembled, but Celine didn't flinch. She held onto the controls, her mind focused on the task at hand. Alex's voice was urgent. We need to hit that core now, Captain. They're charging up the superweapon. Celine's pulse quickened. The superweapon was almost ready to fire, and if they didn't act fast, it would be too late. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, drawing in a steadying breath. The power inside her surged, and with it, a sense of clarity. She could feel the energy around her, flowing through the ship, through the very fabric of space itself. She could do this. Firing, Celine commanded. The Horizon unleashed its full power, a massive beam of energy shooting from the ship's weapons, striking the core of that HFY-SCI superweapon. The explosion was blinding, a burst of light that filled the vastness of space. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, the HFY-SCI ship's massive frame began to break apart, pieces of debris scattering in all directions as the weapon inside it collapsed. We did it, Alex shouted, her voice full of relief. But Celine didn't allow herself to relax. The battle was far from over. The HFY-SCI fleet was still out there, and they were regrouping for a final assault. We've only won the first round, Darius said, his eyes narrowing as he watched the remaining HFY-SCI ships maneuvering for another strike. Get ready for round two. Celine nodded, her grip tightening on the controls. She could feel the power inside her still, and she knew that she would need every ounce of it to finish what they had started. The Horizon sped toward the remaining enemy ships, her crew at the ready. Celine's thoughts were clear now. She wasn't just fighting for Earth, she was fighting for her team, for Darius, for the future. And she would not let them down.